The most successful businesses in the world don't succeed by accident. They look completely different from the outside, different sectors, different countries, different owners, but underneath, almost all of them follow the same structured path to excellence. And here's the part that surprises people. That path isn't complicated. It's common sense. The trouble is, common sense is rarely common practice. I'm Dr. Alan O'Neill, and for more than 35 years, I've worked inside boardrooms from Selfridges in London, where I helped lead one of the best-known retail transformations of its era, to family businesses, scale-ups and corporates, all across Ireland, the UK, Europe, the Far East, the Middle East. Different sizes, different sectors, the same recurring pattern. Good people working hard in businesses that have somehow become harder to run than they should be. Over those years, I built a framework to make sense of it all. I call it the 7 steps to profit. It's the operating spine that I use to help leadership teams join the dots, find the friction, and turn good intentions into disciplined performance. Not only that, I tested the model extensively in my own doctoral research. In this boardroom breakdown, I'm going to walk you through all the 7 steps. By the end, you'll have a way of looking at your own business, not as a list of separate problems to firefight, but as one connected system. And I'll give you the single question to ask your leadership team that tells you very quickly where your real friction is hiding. So let's get into it. Let's start with why so much friction is happening now, because something has genuinely changed. Business hasn't become harder to run because leaders have maybe become less capable. It's because the world outside the business is moving faster than the inside of most organizations can keep up with. More change, more competition, more demanding customers with more choice and less patience. AI is rewriting how work gets done. ESG and sustainability are rewriting what's expected of us. Talent is harder to attract, harder to keep, and harder to fully engage than at any point in my lifetime. And leaders are expected to absorb all of that quickly, confidently, and without breaking the business in the process. That's the situation every CEO I meet is living in. The outside world is moving faster than the inside of most organizations can cope with. Keep that in mind. But here's what experience has taught me. The market is rarely the real problem. The real problem is almost always internal, and it's very specific. It's friction and fragmentation. Watch how it happens. Strategy gets discussed in one room. Culture gets discussed in another, usually with a different group of people. People development sits with HR. Customer experience gets treated as a department rather than something that the whole business delivers. Execution becomes a list of disconnected projects. And the proposition, the very thing that actually makes you valuable to your customers, gets assumed rather than sharpened. Now, none of those functional conversations are wrong. The problem is they're happening separately and creating silos. Each part of the business is being optimized on its own by people doing their honest best, and the whole drifts out of alignment. So everyone is busy. Everyone has priorities. Everyone wants growth, but the priorities compete. The moving parts stop moving together and the business starts to feel heavier than its size should warrant. That feeling, we're more successful than ever and it's never felt harder. That's the sound of a fragmented system. Busy is not the same as joined up. Activity is not the same as progress. And, a business becomes harder to run when its moving parts stop moving together. And fragmentation has a cost. Not always a dramatic one. That's what makes it dangerous. Sometimes it shows up loudly. Meetings multiply, decisions slow down, departments defend their own corner. Good people get quietly frustrated and start updating their CVs. But more often it leaks away invisibly through rework, waste, missed opportunities, weak follow-through. Customers who don't complain, they just stop coming back. Profit doesn't only disappear through bad strategy, it leaks through poor alignment. And because it leaks quietly, most leadership teams are treating the symptom that shouts the loudest instead of the disconnect underneath it. Here's the insight that changes everything. The problem is rarely one big thing, it's usually 7 connected things drifting apart, which means the answer isn't another initiative piled on top of the pile. It's a way of seeing the whole business at once. Profit doesn't disappear only through bad strategy. It leaks through poor alignment. And the problem is rarely one big thing. It's usually 7 connected things drifting apart. So what do leaders actually need? Well, certainly not more initiatives. They need a practical operating spine. One simple way to see the whole organization and ask 3 questions. Where's the friction? What matters most? And what needs to happen next? That's exactly what the 7 steps of profit is built to do. It isn't 7 topics to work through and tick off. It's one connected system, 7 links in a single chain. Let me give you the whole chain first, then we take each link in turn. The 7 steps are simple to say, but they're hard to live. The discipline is in making them real inside your business, week after week. So here they are. Step 1 is North Star, 2 is culture, 3 is strategy, 4 is people, 5 is customer, 6 is proposition, 7 is execution. I describe them as a structured path. You start with ambition, build the right culture, choose the right strategy, equip the right people, understand the customer, sharpen your proposition, then execute with discipline. Now, I genuinely doubt there's a business professor alive who would argue with that list. They're common sense. So if there's such common sense, why do most businesses only run a few of them well? That's the real question, and it's why we go through them one at a time. Step 1 is your North Star. This is direction. Where are we going? What are we trying to become? What does winning actually look like? And why should anyone care? Far too many businesses confuse ambition with a vague vision or mission statement on the wall. But a real North Star is a decision-making tool. When the destination is clear, your people can make good choices without escalating everything upwards. When it's vague, however, the organization quietly invents its own routes, and you end up with a dozen versions of the strategy, depending on who you ask. What bad looks like is a beautifully worded vision that nobody below the leadership team could even explain in their own words or even articulate. What good looks like, you could stop any 3 people in the business in the corridor and they describe where you're heading in roughly the same terms and tell you why it matters to them. That second business makes faster decisions with less friction every single day because the North Star is doing the work. A North Star isn't just words on a website, it's direction. And when that destination is vague, the organization invents its own routes. Now, here's a suggestion. Ask your leadership team, could our people clearly explain where this business is going and why it matters? Step 2 is culture. And culture is the most misunderstood word in business. It's not the soft stuff. It's not bean bags or beer on Fridays or posters, fruit bowls or values printed on the reception wall. Culture is how things really get done when no senior person is in the room. It's what your leaders reward, what they tolerate and what they ignore. It's how your people's hearts and stomachs feel on a Monday morning. And here's why it's step 2, right after ambition. Because if your culture doesn't support your North Star stays theoretical. You can announce a brilliant strategy, but if the day-to-day behavior of the organization pulls against it, the behavior wins every single time. What does bad look like? Values in the wall that the leadership team themselves quietly breach under pressure. People notice that faster than anything else. What does good look like? The behavior you'd want is the behavior that gets rewarded and role modeled at the top, especially in a bad day when it's hardest. Culture can accelerate a strategy or quietly sabotage it. The culture you tolerate is the culture you have. There's no third option. Don't forget, culture isn't soft. It's the operating climate. Because the culture you tolerate is the culture that you have. Now, here's a question. What behaviors are we rewarding? What are we tolerating? And what are quietly blocking performance? Step 3 is strategy. And strategy is not a long document that lives in a drawer. Strategy is a set of choices. Where will we play? How will we win? What will we see as priorities? And what will we stop doing? In my experience, most organizations don't have a strategy problem. They've got a choice and execution problem. They're trying to do too much. They've got 15 priorities, which is another way of saying they have none. When everything is important, nothing is truly strategic. And the business then spreads itself thinly across all of it. What bad looks like? A strategy day that produces 40 actions and changes nothing, because nothing was actually chosen and nothing was dropped. What does good look like? Well, it's a short list of things that genuinely must move this year, and an honest list of things you've decided not to do, so the energy, money and talent can concentrate. Good strategy creates focus. It makes the trade-offs visible. It tells people where to put their attention. And a business that can say no is a business with a real strategy. But be careful, budgets are not plans. They are the score of the game. How you plan to achieve those budgets is much more important. Now, here's a prompt. Ask your people, what are the few things that must move this year for the business to be genuinely stronger? Step 4 is people. This is where strategy becomes human. You can have the right direction and the right strategy, but without the right people, properly equipped, nothing actually happens. People need clarity. They need the skills and the confidence. They need accountability and they need leadership. And they need one thing that's often missing. They need to understand how their own role connects to the bigger picture. Far too often, in many businesses, people are executing tasks without really understanding the full enterprise. They're doing their job well and have no real sense of how the whole thing creates value. And that's why I talk so much about enterprise thinking, which is about helping people see beyond their own desk, beyond their own department, to how the business actually wins or loses. What does bad look like? Highly capable people, heads down, optimizing their own corner, sometimes in ways that quietly hurt the next department along the corridor. What does good look like? It's people who can connect what they do on a Tuesday to the North Star you set in step 1. That's when discretionary effort shows up. People isn't one thing, it's structure, leadership, engagement, succession, reward, development, but it all hinges on whether your people can see the whole, not just their own small part. Great people in a broken system will lose every time. So here's a prompt for you to ask your people. If you ran an employee engagement survey tomorrow, what score would you honestly expect for engagement? Step 5 is customer. And the most important thing I can tell you is this. The customer is not a department. Customer experience is not owned by the customer service team. Every function affects the customer, directly or indirectly. Finance affects the customer. Operations, IT, leadership affects the customer. Because the customer doesn't experience your org chart, they experience the whole organization as one thing. And that's precisely why customer experience is so tied to culture and execution. Here's the line I'd ask you to remember. The customer feels the seams in your business. Every internal handover you haven't smoothed out, every silo you've tolerated, every bit of friction between your departments. The customer feels it on the outside, even though they can't see what's causing it inside. What bad looks like? It's a slick front of house promise sitting on top of a confused, fragmented back of house. The gap always shows. What does good look like? The inside and the outside, they match up. The experience the customer gets is a true reflection of how aligned you actually are behind the scenes. You cannot consistently delight customers with a frustrated, disjointed organization behind the curtain. The inside always shows up on the outside. The customer experiences the seams in your organization. Don't forget that. And also remember, the outside customer feels the inside friction. Here's a thought. Where do your customers feel friction that's actually caused by something that we haven't fixed internally? Step 6 is your proposition. This is the answer to a deceptively simple question. Why should a customer choose you, stay with you, pay a fair price, and even recommend you? A proposition is not just your product or service, it's the total value you bring. The product, yes, but also the experience, the trust, reliability, relationship, and the difference you actually make in your customer's world. And here's why it sits this late in the chain and not at the start. A strong proposition is the result of the first 5 steps working together. Clear ambition, a culture that delivers, a focused strategy, capable people, and a real understanding of the customer. That's what produces a proposition worth paying a premium for. You can't bolt it on with marketing. What bad looks like? It's a business that can't clearly say why it's different. So the market decides the difference for them, and the only lever left is price. What does good look like? Your best customers will describe your value in roughly the same words that you yourself use. And that alignment between your promise and their experience is the whole game. In competitive markets, average propositions get squeezed. A weak proposition doesn't just cost you sales, it creates pressure everywhere else in the business because you're forever competing on price. So, if customers can't see the difference, price becomes the difference. A weak proposition creates pressure everywhere else. Here's a thought for you. Think about this. Why would our best customers choose us again and again? And would they describe our value the same way that we ourselves do? Step 7 is execution. And this is where most good plans go to die. Not because people don't care, but because the business lacks the rhythm, the ownership, and the follow-through. Execution is about discipline, clear priorities, clear owners, clear measures, a clear rhythm of review, and the courage to take corrective action the moment something starts to drift. Not 3 months later when it's a crisis. That last part matters more than people admit. Corrective action isn't criticism, it's simply how a business learns and adjusts in real time. The organizations that execute brilliantly are the ones that never go off course. They're the ones that notice quickly and correct without drama. What does bad look like? It's a strategy launched with great fanfare, a flurry of activity for 6 weeks, and then silence because nobody owned it, nobody reviewed it, and nothing happened when it slipped. What does good look like? It's a simple, relentless operating rhythm. Everyone knows what's being reviewed, who owns it, and what happens when progress stalls. Execution is where common sense finally becomes common practice. It's the bridge between intention and result, and a plan without execution discipline is just a wish. Remember, execution is the bridge between intention and results. So here's a thought for you. What are we reviewing every week? Who owns each item? And what actually happens when something slips? So those are the 7 steps, and I want to come back to where we started because this is the real point. None of them is strange or controversial. That's why a business professor wouldn't argue with the ingredients. But the difference between an average business and an excellent one is not whether they know these 7 words, it's whether they connect them. Watch how the chain works when it's whole and complete. A clear North Star shapes the culture. The culture supports the strategy. The strategy guides the people. The people serve the customer. The customer tests the proposition. The proposition creates the value, and execution turns all of it into results. Break one link, and performance suffers somewhere you might not expect it. Strengthen the links, however, and the whole business gets easier to run. That's the thing to understand about this framework. The magic isn't in the list. The magic is in the links. Now, I know that in most organizations, leaders inside the boardroom have the best of intentions to live all 7 steps because they are common sense. But let me say it again. Friction and fragmentation regularly trips us up. I've watched this play out many times, and the pattern is always the same. In one business, the problem first looks like culture. In another, it looks like customer experience. In another, it looks like strategy. But look underneath, and the issue is almost always connected, links in the chain that have come apart. The best known example from my own career is Selfridges. That business didn't transform because of one clever initiative or one big idea. It transformed because the leadership connected the whole chain: ambition, culture, customer, proposition, people, and execution, and pulled the levers in the right order. When I first got involved in Selfridges, we inherited a great business, a house of brands that was generating profits of £45 million per year. But there were cracks here and there, and even though it was profitable, we knew there was more to be achieved. Over the course of 8 years, we transformed the business. We worked on every single one of the 7 steps at different times. Over that time, the store stopped being a place to buy products and became an experience. The people understood the ambition. The proposition got sharper. The customer experience became genuinely distinctive. And execution became disciplined enough to make it repeatable, day after day, across the whole operation. And that's the lesson. Performance improves when the system improves, not when you pull one lever You don't scale excellence through slogans, you scale it through systems that make the extraordinary feel repeatable. Oh, and by the way, we grew the profitability to almost £200 million per year, along with several global Best Department Store awards. Remember, transformation is rarely one big lever, it's several connected levers pulled in the right order. So here's the challenge I'll leave you with, and it's a shift in the question you ask. Most leadership teams ask, what's our biggest problem? I want you to ask a better one. Where are the 7 steps disconnected? Is the North Star genuinely clear? Is the culture helping or quietly hindering? Is the strategy focused? Or is it 15 different priorities? Are the people equipped and connected to the whole? Do we really understand the customer? Is the proposition strong enough to avoid a price war? And is execution really disciplined? Because the issue, as I said, that's hurting your performance is often not the one that's shouting the loudest. A customer problem can be a people problem. A people problem can be a culture problem. A culture problem can be a leadership problem. An execution problem can be a strategy problem. It goes on and on. The 7 steps help you see those connections so you treat the cause, not the symptom. Remember, before you prescribe the fix, diagnose the system. The most successful businesses follow a structured path to excellence. Not because they're bureaucratic, because they understand that performance needs a system. North Star gives direction. Culture creates the climate. Strategy helps to make the choices. People bring it to life. Customer keeps it honest. Proposition creates value, and execution delivers the result. Simple? Yes. Easy? No. Common sense? Absolutely. Common practice? Not always. And that gap between what we all know and what we actually do is exactly where your opportunity lives right now. Now, if this way of thinking resonates, there are 3 things that you can do next. 1. Subscribe to the channel. I'll be breaking each of these 7 areas down in much more detail in future boardroom briefings and the KISS shorts. KISS, keep it short and simple. Secondly, if you lead a business and it feels harder to run than it should, Cara can help you find where the friction really sits. That often starts with the 7+ Index, which is our organizational health assessment, or with the focused Cara 7 Connect program. The links are below. The third thing, if you're planning a leadership conference or a senior leadership team session, this practical common sense message is exactly what I bring to my keynotes. The goal is always the same, to help leaders turn common sense into common practice. I'm Dr. Alan O'Neill. This has been Boardroom Breakdown. I'll see you the next time. Thank you for listening.